Open source is present in our lives, and many of us don't even realize how important it has become. GNU/Linux and BSD servers support our websites, online stores, corporate networks, mobile devices, personal computers, supercomputers, among many, many other applications. 20 years ago, the notion of free software, where users could peek at the source code of an application, already existed thanks to efforts of Richard Stallman and the Free Software Foundation. Linus Torvalds, in the 1991, had a similar vision when he started to develop Linux, and with the available source code, it grew exponentially to include support for new hardware and software. In 1993, Red Hat started, as a startup, the development of its own Linux distribution for corporate use. In 1994, the development work of the MySQL DBMS started. In 1996, the Apache HTTP servers started to dominate the Internet. Well, Netscape, also inspired by this concept, in 1998, March, I believe, released the source code for the Netscape Communicator browser. Netscape was a company that had just reported disappointing financial results and announced to the world that it would make the core of its product available to the thinkers. The term open source and its definition was adopted in February 3rd of 1998, and the open source initiative was formed a little later. And one of the founders of the working group, Bruce Perens, adapted the free software guidelines he wrote for the Debian distribution in order to serve as the official open source definition. In the decades that followed, software and the open source code became intrinsically part of our digital lives. Applications like LibreOffice and GIMP and many, many others stand out as replacements for proprietary products, and Linux has made truly remarkable progress as platform of choice for companies around the world. Well, the value of the open source it's clear. It allowed contributors from different backgrounds and skill levels to collaborate and create valuable software. When it comes to open source software, a big project comes to mind. Linux, also known as GNU/Linux. There are other examples like BSD variants like FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD, but Linux and its various distributions stand out more. Linux operating systems were once considered hostile to less experienced users, but currently this is not the case. But be sure to choose your distribution carefully. Most people start with Ubuntu because it's easy to use, but there are also Debian and other reliable derivatives like Pop! OS from System 76, a hardware supplier with a unique focus on Linux, and which I have talked about several times here. But there is also Arch and its derivatives like Manjaro. Well, open source has evolved to the point where there is a viable replacement for almost everything we need. GIMP, LibreOffice, Blender, Lightshot, Kdenlive are clear examples of free software that produces very good results compared to their proprietary competition. Many open source tools and technologies have been developed along the years, and some of them are now being used to fight this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis around the world. For example, SORMAS, the Surveillance Outbreak Response Management and Analysis System, and DHIS2, there is a health tracking system that is used now around the world. In the cases of hardware, the development of open solutions is a little more complex. For example, System 76, which sells systems that run Linux and free software, but its hardware does not have open source. In some cases, it may be possible to find hardware schemes available to the public, but companies that go into them, like the CPU and GPUs, are almost always proprietary. On the other hand, the Open Motors project is a prototype that aims to build an electric vehicle using an open source modular electric car platform. Arduino is a platform for embedded systems that allow, for example, those who like and are interested in robotics to create components and prototypes. There are multiple open source Spark designs that have been around for many years. Now, RISC-V is also gaining some momentum, but there is still a small gap on performance comparing to other platforms. There are still many other open source software or hardware projects, some of them with great potential and capacity to evolve. Others probably will not resist and will eventually disappear. Well, this leads us to a problem of the open source diversity that it's obvious to those who already know and work with open source projects. Large companies, even self-declared enemies of the movement in the past, now recognize the power of the community. They recognized that the transparent process benefits the end user and encourage innovation, so they are starting to support some projects too. Over the past 20 years, the people who created open source software have helped to create a bold new world and have enabled some of our most important infrastructures. I think very interesting years await us. Probably the next 20 years of open source will be at least as exciting as the previous ones. I hope this information has been helpful to you. Thanks very much for watching. If you like the content, please feel free to press the like button and subscribe. This will encourage the creation of new content. See you next time.